Hey everyone, welcome to Mountain Beast Mysteries. One of the things Bigfoot is known to do is throw rocks at people. A lot of people have reported having experiences where they're out camping, they're sitting around the campfire, or pretty much doing anything out in the wilderness, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a rock comes flying towards them, or a pebble. Like, it can be anything from a little pebble to a big rock. My dad actually had this happen to him. It's talked about in my film Wild Man, My Search for Sasquatch here on the channel. If you go to the main channel page, it's the featured video. You can watch it there and he tells the story. And I know a few other people who have had rock throwing experiences as well, including the head of the Alberta Sasquatch organization, Rob McNeil. He had an experience at a place called Brown Creek near Nordegg where he was camping. It was a rainy night. And in the cover of that rain and the noise of the rain, something snuck up to the camp and threw rocks into the camp, and they were like bouncing off the little table they had in there. So for something to be out in the wilderness that has the ability to pick up rocks, I mean, it has to be something with intelligence and dexterity in the fingers. It can't be something like a bear or a deer or anything like that. It's either going to be a person, a human being, or Bigfoot. In the encounter I want to talk about today, there's a rock throwing element. This happened back in 2011 in Idaho. There was a man and his girlfriend out in the wilderness camping. It was late in the evening, they're cooking supper, and all of a sudden the dogs run off into the woods. This is a very common thing too that happens. People's dogs will sense something and they'll just go ballistic and they'll chase after it. Usually, most of the time, the dogs return, but you know, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. But they initially think, oh, there might be a bear out there, so the dogs are chasing after a bear. But the gentleman goes to his truck, he grabs a flashlight and a pistol, and as he's scanning the trees in the area, he sees Sasquatch. It's not a bear. It's a Sasquatch. And they end up having a terrifying experience that, causes them to pack up hastily and leave the area. So let's have a quick listen to this encounter. During a camping trip along the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River, we had recently finished dinner. While sitting fireside, our dogs, a border collie and a pug, leapt up and ran into the forest that separated the campsite from the creek. Neither made any sound but simply ran into the woods at twilight. Frustrated at the thought of chasing dogs in the wood at night, I retrieved my flashlight from the cab of my truck. Upon approaching the tree line, the dogs exploded out of the woods and ran to the truck where they cowered in fear, staring into the woods. My initial fear was we were dealing with a cougar or a bear. I retrieved my pistol from the console and instructed my girlfriend to put more wood on the fire. We managed to get the dogs out of the canopied bed where they'd been taking shelter and placed them into a spare tent. I approached the forest, and while scanning the trees with my flashlight, I caught sight of a large black Sasquatch standing behind a tree approximately 30 feet in front of me. I retreated back away from the woods, and after a few minutes I sat in my chair with my flashlight and pistol in my lap. Initial hope was that it would simply go away. My girlfriend was sitting about 4 feet away, and after shouting into the forest that I was armed and would shoot if threatened, a large rock, 8 inches long and 5 inches wide, came tumbling out of the trees and went between us, grazing the top of the fire as it passed, causing hot coals and sparks to fly against my dining canopy. We both jumped up out of surprise, and while trying to keep an eye on the forest, I was able to extinguish the hot coals burning the grass and canopy with an open soda. Out of fear and disgust, I fired 2 rounds from the revolver into the air at a 45-degree angle. The creature then moved off to our left, crunching undergrowth as it moved. Then it stopped and we heard a large crack like that of a tree snapping. Then the creature moved off to the right where it crossed the creek at the point where I had originally seen it. It made 2 loud splashes in the water and moved to the opposite shore where it was heard to be moving noisily up the hillside opposite our camp. We hastily gathered our more expensive gear and tossed it into the truck, leaving our tents, coolers, and various other items. We put the dogs in the cab, extinguished the fire, and abandoned the camp.
We drove 45 minutes home to Coeur d'Alene and returned the following morning to retrieve the remainder of our equipment. I found the large stone that it threw, and I kept it. We also discovered the tree snap was actually a twin pine about 5 inches in diameter that was broken about 6 feet up from the ground. No prints were seen as the ground was packed hard due to heavy use that summer. The creek was also running high.
I've definitely had experiences myself where I get so creeped out at night that I want to leave so bad and so frantically that I'm like willing to leave equipment behind. I've had that happen before. I don't know if there's a Sasquatch around, but I've had instances where I've heard weird noises and I've had that feeling come over me where like maybe I should just quickly get out of here. I'll come back for my stuff the next day, which is what happens in this encounter. They are so freaked out that they take off, they drive 45 minutes home, and the next morning they come back and get their stuff. But at the beginning of the encounter, like the dogs took off, they sensed something, they took off, and then I guess they found what they were sensing, and it scared them so badly that they ran back to the camp area and were hiding and cowering in fear. The guy sees a black Sasquatch looking at them, watching them from the trees. And I mean, in this story, it's pretty crazy to have like an 8-inch long rock being thrown. That's pretty substantial. Usually it is just pebbles, but like an 8-inch long rock, that if you whip that at somebody, like you could easily hurt them. This thing maybe didn't want to hurt them, so it just threw it over the fire, which caused a little bit of trouble, as you know, the guy had to make sure his canopy didn't start on fire. But for the most part, like when you hear these rock throwing experiences, nobody gets hurt. It's like they throw the rocks near the people to freak them out and scare them, and it could be a territorial thing or just a playful thing. But the way the dogs were acting and the senses that the people that were in this experience got, like, it was probably a territorial thing. It was probably to scare them out of the area, and the creature was successful. They're camped by a creek, and where there's running water, there is the ability to sneak up on people. You can use the sound of the water to get as close as you want to the camp, and you know, it is a really easy way to sneak up on people, to use, you know, the surroundings like that, to use the river, to use rain. Like I said at the beginning of the video, when Rob had his rock throwing experience, it was raining out. So those are times when you probably should be thinking about Sasquatch. If you're out in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, in an area where there's a history of reports, if you camp next to a river where there's noise constantly, if you're camping in a time where it's raining or storming out, those are probably peak times, especially in like the late evening, to have an encounter when the sun has gone down and it's dark as well. They have all the advantage in the world. They have the cover of sound and the cover of darkness. So that seems to be what was going on in this case here. We had rock throwing experiences like this at the Alberta habituation site in Nordegg. That's the tree structure area with those, you know, crazy teepee-like structures that have been featured all over the internet and on TV. There was an experience there that was had a couple years ago, where half the group stayed back at the campfire and half the group was off exploring at night, and something was throwing rocks in at the camp area towards the fire. It's something that does happen, and it's just, I really think it's just a way to let people either know that they're there and to be careful, or to actually scare people out of an area. But we're probably never going to know the actual reason as to why they do that. But that's all I wanted to talk about in today's video. I just wanted to share this creepy encounter. The rock throwing stuff is interesting when they're actually doing things to interact with people. But thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Mountain Beast Mysteries.